MLB free agency is in full swing, and there are still some big names out on the market. Welcome back to another edition of Penn State Sports Night. I'm Jacob Cheris, and I'm joined by Chris Lemmo and Logan Bourandas, and we're going to be breaking down some of the signings that have happened so far. There's been a ton of movement around the league in these past couple of days. So, Logan, I want to hear your thoughts. You know, there's been a lot of signings, questionable, but also some good signings. But I want to know which signing is the best one in your opinion.
Well, Jacob, Starlight, Starbright, Starling Marte is going to light up the night in New York for the Mets. And this is an underrated signing coming over from the Oakland A's, going to New York. It's going to be a 4-year contract, around $78 million or so. But Starling Marte adds a new element to the Mets defense, which is something they've been kind of lacking, especially in the outfield. Marte has been one of the better fielders in center field throughout his entire career. And he's coming off a year where he has some great speed as well. 47 stolen bases, which tied his career high. So Starling Marte adding in elements that the New York Mets haven't really had in recent years with defense and speed. And he's been able to get on base and get some good hits as well, hitting in around the 280s as well throughout his entire career. So Starling Marte is going to be a reliable player for this New York Mets team. He is 33 years old right now, so there are going to be some concerns in the near future with this New York Mets team. But for right now, this is what the Mets have been looking for. It is a huge win that the Mets are able to get Starling Marte.
Now, I got to go with Marcus Semian to Texas. You know, he to me is the star of this offseason. No offense to Starling Marte, but he has, over the last 3 seasons, 2 of the last 3, he has been a top 10 offensive player in the league. He goes unnoticed a lot because he really didn't break out until he got to like age 28, 29 there, but now he has fully established himself as one of the best baseball players right now, just in terms of offensively, but defensively too. His game is awesome. I mean, at second base, I know a lot of people say 7 years for a middle infielder, paying him till he's 36, 37. You don't want to do that. Guess what though? His back can profile as a corner infielder because he can still hit like 40 home runs as we saw this past season. Now, I know that there's certain people here might not like the deal, but here's the thing. Texas has been sitting back and just has been horrible the last couple of years, and they want to speed up their rebuild. What better way than to get one of the game's premier middle infielders? That's the way you build a team. You build up the middle. You build catcher, shortstop, second, center fielder. And that's exactly what Texas is doing here. I love the deal, and only $25 million a year. I think that's a steal. I mean, for, again, a guy that can hit 40 homers, hit 270, 280 every year, he's going to do great things in Texas.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see really how Semian helps, the Rangers rebuild, because they weren't really that good this year. And with the Mets, a healthy Jacob deGrom, and now Max Scherzer, a 3-time Cy Young winner. That's probably the best 1-2 punch in baseball. But now let's go to the opposite side of the spectrum with the worst signings. Logan, a rare sighting right here. What do you think?
Well, I think it's time we circle back to that Marcus Semian contract. And Chris, I know we have a podcast together. We agree on a lot of things, but I have to disagree on this contract. I think it was a bad move for the Rangers to go after a guy like Marcus Semian, a guy who's 31 years old right now, and they're giving him a long-term contract after just making his first All-Star game this year. It's not really a solid investment for the Texas Rangers, who finished with 60 wins on the season and had the 3rd worst record in the MLB. So spending that much money on a guy like Marcus Semian, who I mentioned, 31 years old, he did pop off this year at second base for the Blue Jays, but there's going to be a lot of risk there for Semian because the year before had probably one of his worst years of his MLB career. And I worry this could be an Alex Rodriguez 2.0 situation where in the offseason of 2000, the Rangers gave A-Rod a huge contract and ended up trading him midway through it to the New York Yankees, just because you can't win a game with one guy when you're paying one guy when you trot out a lineup of 9 players. It just doesn't work like that. So Marcus Semian, not really the guy that can rely upon, at least in my opinion, to be that guy. I mean, it's a great move for Semian to take that deal, but for the Rangers, it could be a disaster.
It could be for the Rangers. I think on an island, it doesn't look as good, but when you see what else they're doing, building around him, I think it's a smart decision. And again, I also said before, I like the way that they build the team. You can get a corner player a dime a dozen. A premier defensive and offensive bat doesn't come around that often. And I think Texas getting into that new stadium there in Arlington, they didn't want to wait around for their window to get open in like 4 or 5 years. You see what's happening across the AL West. The Astros losing key guys. The Athletics look like they're going to go into a sell-off now. They see that they can maybe prop that window open a few years earlier, and I think that's what they're trying to do. Now, in terms of what I think is the worst deal, I think it's Steven Matz. A 4-year deal with St. Louis. I mean, look, Steven Matz is fine. I mean, he's an okay middle-of-the-rotation pitcher. That's what he is. Giving him 4 years felt a little aggressive. I didn't really see the need for that. I thought the money was a little bit rich for me. I mean, if you want a guy like that, you could get Marcus Strowman, who's even better as a number 3. I mean, he's probably a number 2 in most rotations. So I thought that was a little bit rich. I mean, obviously Steve Cohen doesn't care, though. Steve Cohen's loss there is the Mets' gain, I guess, because after he left, they have spent a ton of money. But I think that the Cardinals kind of should have looked for better options there.
Yeah, going back to the Rangers, like it's going to be interesting to see because they just signed Corey Seager to a 10-year, $325 million contract, and they desperately needed help in the middle infield. So that's a big signing. That should help them going forward. But I want to ask you both something. So give me, each of you, one pitcher and one batter that you guys have your eye on that hasn't been signed yet, and where do you think they'll end up?
Yeah, I think I'll start out with probably the best hitter coming into free agency, and with the guys like Max Scherzer, Corey Seager signing, it's easy to forget that Carlos Correa is still available in free agency right now, and he's coming off probably his best year as a hitter for the Houston Astros, finished 5th in MVP voting last year, and I could easily see him leaving Houston and going to a team like the Detroit Tigers, a team that finished 81-81, a surprising .500 record for the Detroit Tigers, and they've proven that they're willing to spend money. They signed Eduardo Rodriguez earlier on in the offseason, one of the first few moves of the offseason. And the former manager of the Houston Astros, A.J. Hinch, now is the manager of the Detroit Tigers, who Carlos Correa obviously knows very well from his time in Houston. So I think it's a perfect fit, and Correa could be a veteran presence with the glove and with the bat. So I think it's a great fit there. And then you take a look at a guy like Marcus Strowman on the mound, and he had a great year in New York after being traded from Toronto and had a 3.02 ERA. Was really one of the more consistent pitchers of the season, with Jacob deGrom going down and Taijuan Walker falling off a cliff. So Marcus Strowman was a reliable pitcher. I don't think he goes back to New York, however. I think that his time there is pretty much done after getting Max Scherzer. I think he's going to find his way out west, going to Seattle Mariners, and teaming up and forming a 1-2 punch with Robbie Ray, the Cy Young winner in the AL this year. I think they'll be a reliable 1-2 punch, and I think that the Mariners, they're capable of spending money. They have a lot of room to do so. The guy that making most money is Mitch Haniger. He's making around $8 million after Ray, so I think it makes perfect sense, and adding that pitching to a young lineup is going to make a lot of sense for the future for Seattle.
I got to go with 2 guys. One, Nick Castellanos, and I think Nick Castellanos has been underappreciated. I think the bat there is electric in the corner outfield. Everybody says, oh, he's going to be a DH. Well, one, so what if he is? I mean, J.D. Martinez is a DH, and he's a great bat to have in any lineup. And 2, his corner outfield defense has gotten great. But where do I think he'll be taking his talents? I think he's going to hit a lot of deep drives to left field in Citizens Bank Park. Nick Castellanos has all fields power, and he really showed that in Cincinnati, okay? And I think when you look at a guy like him, he fits playing in Citizens Bank Ballpark. Cincinnati, a very hitters-friendly ballpark. Philadelphia, also one of the top 5 or 10 in the league in terms of being a hitter's paradise. Also, he would reunite with the former GM in Detroit, Dave Dombrowski. They've already been in contact. I really think he would fit perfectly in that left field spot that was Andrew McCutchen's last season. Now for pitching, I'm going to go with Carlos Rodon. He's really young, only around 29. His problem was he's been hurt a lot. I mean, he barely pitched in 2019 and 2020, but last season broke out through a no-hitter even, and I think he's going to go to Boston. I know they signed Waka in Boston, but I still think that they need another ace to solidify that rotation. And I think when he's healthy, which again, he rarely is, he can be another ace alongside Chris Sale there to kind of be at the front of Boston's rotation. And looking at the rest of the AL East, I mean, the Yankees have done absolutely nothing. So the East is there for the taking, as Toronto has noticed.
Yep, those are guys that are certainly worth keeping an eye out for. And that's going to do it for this edition of Penn State Sports Night. For Logan Bourandas and Chris Lemmo, I'm Jacob Cheris, and have a good night.
Thank you for watching this edition of Penn State Sports Night. If you're a fan of our content, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips. Also, follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action. For all my colleagues, we are Penn State Sports Night.